Hello, dear friends. Ruslan Belov is on the line, and today, on March 11, 2026, we are conducting a large-scale, maximally detailed review of the current situation on the line of combat contact. Over the past 24 hours, a massive amount of information has accumulated, some of which requires not just a simple listing, but a deep analytical breakdown and a strict separation of the real state of affairs at the front from the enemy's blatant psychological warfare fakes. There are indeed many events. The situation on the vast majority of the front sectors remains extremely tense, dynamic, and abounds with many contradictory reports. Today we will go through all the key directions in detail, analyze the changes on the map, and restore the true picture of what is happening where the enemy is trying to create an illusion of their own successes. I am forced to begin this difficult broadcast with the deeply tragic events that occurred last evening on the territory of the Russian Federation. I am talking about the massive missile strike on the city of Bryansk. The enemy, having crossed yet another invisible boundary of what is permitted, used Western long-range air-launched Storm Shadow missiles of British-French production against the Kremny L microelectronics plant and the adjacent civilian infrastructure. The consequences of this raid turned out to be very severe. The main production workshop of the enterprise sustained significant structural damage, but the loss of equipment and concrete fades in comparison to the irreplaceable human losses. 6 civilians were killed, more than 40 people received injuries of varying degrees of severity, and the most terrible thing is that there are children among the victims. What can be said here, dear friends? We have repeatedly discussed the problem of the so-called red lines. It has been said, and said many times, if strikes are launched against the historical, internationally recognized territory of Russia with long-range Western missiles, British, American, it doesn't matter which ones, this will mean the direct entry of NATO into an open war with our country. We talked, we warned, we drew lines. But in the end, these statements remained just loud words on political rostrums. The enemy sees this situation, feels this pause, and it is precisely this perceived impunity that breeds such brazen, bloody actions. As we know from the practice of the special military operation, the Ministry of Defense prefers not to take hasty, emotional steps. Retaliatory actions to this terrorist strike will definitely follow. Calculated, cold, delivered against the most sensitive strategic infrastructure hubs of Ukraine. We will await the official reports from the Defense Department. Now let's move directly to the map of combat operations. We will skip the Kherson direction today because the nature of the combat operations there remains unchanged. Heavy routine artillery duels are ongoing. The Russian army methodically strikes enemy positions, boats, and manpower concentration areas. The news from there is identical from day to day. Our main focus today is the Zaporozhye and Dnepropetrovsk fronts, where a real information war is unfolding. Yesterday turned out to be extremely nerve-wracking for a huge number of people monitoring the situation. And the matter is not about a real collapse of the front, but the fact that the Ukrainian Centers for Psychological Operations decided to stage a massive media victory at the junction of the Zaporozhye and Dnepropetrovsk regions. Across the entire network of enemy telegram channels, and subsequently through a number of our own careless ones, video footage spread like wildfire, allegedly showing Ukrainian formations on heavy armored vehicles dashing into the settlement of Novogrigorovka. To understand the geography, this is a village located south of Verbovoy, more than 5 kilometers from the current actual line of combat contact, already in the Dnepropetrovsk region. As soon as the video hit the net, immense panic arose. People wrote in the comments that the front had been breached, the AFU had reached operational space, they would now go deep into the rear of our group, cut off all supply routes in the Gulyai-Polye area, and so on in the same panicked tone. Let's turn on our cold reason and break down this fake news in detail, as we always do. Those frames that the Ukrainian side tried to pass off as a fresh, grandiose breakthrough screamed from the very first seconds that this was archival footage. How to determine this? Elementarily, using basic open-source intelligence, OSINT skills. In the video that was so pompously circulated, a local lake in the Novogrigorovka area falls into the frame. And in these supposedly fresh shots, it is clearly visible. The surface of the reservoir is completely covered with ice. And now let's just look at the weather forecast. For the last week, warm spring weather has been present in this region. The daytime temperature steadily stays at plus 14 degrees Celsius, pile 114 degrees 60. At such a temperature, and with the active spring sun, ice physically cannot exist. Besides, the video fragments themselves were strangely, choppily edited and cut in the most interesting places, which suggested an attempt to hide landscape details and the lack of a real firefight. What did we find out in the end? All suspicions were fully confirmed. The video was shot in February, when the enemy indeed launched powerful massive attacks in this sector, and their assault groups did briefly reach the outskirts of Novogrigorovka. Moreover, in the very first days of that offensive, the enemy even broke through to the northern outskirts of Uspanovka. However, they were not allowed to establish a foothold there and were promptly knocked out with heavy losses. Therefore, there is nothing supernatural or catastrophic for the current state of affairs in these frames. Literally a few hours after the start of this media campaign, the Russian side published objective control footage showing Russian armed forces personnel calmly and methodically clearing out that very Novogrigorovka, identifying and destroying the remnants of the AFU infantry hiding in basements. A complete embarrassment for the enemy. It gets to the point of absurdity. In a similar scheme in Verbovoy, a single lost AFU soldier was hiding from artillery in a basement, and based solely on this fact, the Ukrainian command publicly stated that the armed forces of Ukraine had allegedly fully recaptured and controlled Verbovoy. The conclusion for this sector is unambiguous. Novogrigorovka is confidently under the control of the Russian army. There are no AFU units in the village itself or in the immediate vicinity. Verbovoy is also held by our troops. All enemy attempts shatter against the dense defense, bringing them nothing but heavy losses. Loud statements that the AFU have allegedly recaptured 400 square kilometers of territory and almost liberated the entire Dnepropetrovsk region are complete nonsense. For more than 30 days of fighting, the Ukrainian side has not been able to provide a single verified frame confirming stable control over at least one claimed village. Not a single one for the entire month. Yesterday they tried to pull a trick with Novogrigorovka, but publicly fell flat on their faces with the February ice. However, dear friends, I absolutely do not want to create the illusion that everything is going easily and cloudlessly for our guys in this sector. Absolutely not. The situation there is objectively extremely difficult and exhausting. The guys on the front line get in touch and say directly, "It is so hard there right now, perhaps like never before." The enemy spares neither people nor shells. The sky is literally buzzing. Swarms of enemy reconnaissance and strike drones, FPV kamikazes, are working continuously. Novozlatopol, Lyubimovka, and other logistical hubs are under constant fire. The enemy is trying with all their might to cut our supply lines, preventing the normal organization of ammunition delivery, evacuation of the wounded, delivery of provisions, and rotation of personnel. The guys have to hold on through sheer willpower. We really hope that with the arrival of full spring and thick foliage, it will become a little easier to hide equipment and move between positions. Friends, right now I want to address everyone who is watching this broadcast for the first time. If you value objective analysis without panic and without propaganda, where facts are strictly separated from fakes, subscribe to the channel right now. There are very few such breakdowns on the net. It will take 2 seconds and you will always know the truth about what is happening at the front. The Primorskoye area in the zone of Kamenskoye and Stepnogorsk. A lot of dubious and contradictory information is coming from here. Video footage appeared where soldiers of the main intelligence directorate, GUR of Ukraine, are supposedly conducting a mop-up operation in the northern part of Primorskoye. However, no other corroborating materials from this sector have been published. Geolocation experts have not been able to tie these frames to the terrain. The buildings in relief do not match the real architecture of the northern part of the village. There are no independent confirmations. No serious changes to the front line have been recorded. Russian troops are systematically strengthening their defense and expanding the grey zone north of Stepnogorsk. Gulyai-Polye direction. The situation is positional in nature, but the initiative remains with the Russian army. Russian armed forces units are exerting systemic pressure in the direction of Verkhnaya Tersa and Vozdvizhevka. The Ukrainian command is trying to organize counterattacks on Gulyai Polye from the direction of Zaliznichnoye, Starokrainka, and Tsvetkovoye. All assaults are successfully repelled with the infliction of fire damage. Regarding Rezdianka, the fog of war is especially thick. Some sources claim a mop-up and a temporary pullback to prepared lines. Others speak of an expansion of the control zone on the flanks. There are no verified materials from either side, so we are not making any changes to the map. We are waiting for footage. Dobropolye direction. Extremely encouraging news is coming from here. Let me remind you that yesterday we made a large-scale update to the map in this sector. Several important tactical heights and strongholds officially passed under the control of the Russian armed forces. Today this trend continued. Verified objective control video footage has been received from the Hryshyne area. These are the close approaches to Pokrovsk. The video captures positional battles directly in the residential area. An advance to a depth of about 600 meters towards the geographical center of the settlement has been recorded. A number of authoritative sources report that Hryshyne is already 80 to 90% under the control of the Russian army. The final mop-up of the northwestern outskirts is underway. All adjacent territory on the map is colored red. On the Dobropolye salient, the front line globally remains unchanged. However, aviation and MLRS continuously deliver crushing strikes against equipment concentrations, command posts, and AFU reserves in the area of Belitskoye and Dobropolye. In the Toretsk sector yesterday, a salient in the enemy's defense was successfully cut off. An advance of up to 1 kilometer along the front has been recorded. Konstantinovka direction. Events are developing quite dynamically. Today, a video was published demonstrating the capture of a key fortified platoon stronghold on the eastern approaches to the city. The zone of control has been expanded by 500 meters deep into the enemy defense at once. All the territory to the east has been completely cleared and is under the unconditional control of Russian forces. Assault detachments have already engaged in battles in the central part of the urban agglomeration. In addition to this, data is coming in about the expansion of the control zone in the direction of Dolgaya Balka and in the sector between Dolgaya Balka and Ilyanovka. There is no visual confirmation yet, but the intensity of reports from various independent sources gives reason to expect verified footage in the very near future. Slavyansk direction. The key news of the day is that the settlement of Golubovka has been finally cleared and irreversibly passed under the control of the Russian army. The flanks are secured and demining is underway. In addition to this, the Russian armed forces are conducting active offensive actions west of Privolye. There, the enemy has equipped a chain of hidden strongholds in dense forest tracts. A difficult meter-by-meter push is taking place. Lines are being strengthened in the vicinity of Fedorovka Vatoraya and Lipovka. Regarding Reznikovka, text messages are arriving about the squeezing out of the enemy in the western part, but without video confirmation, we are not adding anything to the map. Krasny-Lyman direction. Without significant changes, positional battles. Let's move straight to the Kupiansk direction. In Kupiansk, extremely active combat operations do not subside directly within the city limits in its central part. In recent days, Ukrainian information resources have launched a massive campaign, trying to convince everyone that Kupiansk has allegedly been completely cleared of Russian troops. I declare with full responsibility, this is an absolute lie and purposeful disinformation. Let me remind you of the real state of affairs. Russian assault units have dug in the central part of the city, turning complexes of high-rise buildings into impregnable citadels. Ukrainian troops, despite numerous attempts involving elite reserves, have never been able to break through the defense in these high-rises. Debunking this lie is elementary. We all know perfectly well how professionally the Ukrainian media works when they have something to brag about. If Kupiansk had really passed under their control, the internet would be flooded with dozens of victorious videos with flags on administration buildings and hundreds of photos from recognizable points of the city. But there is none of that. Absolute silence. And this means only one thing. They do not control the city. There is a terrible slaughter going on there, and the enemy is suffering the heaviest losses. In parallel, fierce clashes continue in the vicinity of Kupiansk-Uzlovoy and Kucherovka. The front line within the city limits has stabilized. No significant territorial advance in either direction is recorded. We conclude our review with the northernmost sector, the Sumy direction. And here the most significant confirmed news of the day is arriving. Official reports backed by video materials have been received. The village of Chervenaya Zaria has completely and finally passed under the control of the Russian armed forces. Moreover, not resting on their laurels, Russian units are right now expanding the security zone to the west of this settlement. To understand the scale, let me remind you of the chronology. Earlier, Kharkovka was successively taken under control, then the zone of responsibility was expanded in the vicinity of Komarovka, Belaya Bereza, and a mop-up was conducted in the Sidorovka area. Today, Chervenaya Zaria was added to this list. Analyzing this sequence, we clearly see how the Russian army, step by step, village by village, is steadily pushing the front line back, creating a vital buffer security zone to protect our territories from terrorist shelling. Regarding other settlements in this direction, Pokrovka, Andreevka, Alexievka, Yunakovka, there are also reports of a creeping offensive and squeezing out of the enemy. However, without visual confirmation, we are not adding them to the map yet. The trend is obvious. Whether what is happening is a prelude to a full-scale offensive in the Sumy direction is impossible to answer. The General Staff's plans are kept in the strictest secrecy. But one thing I can state with absolute certainty. The front line here has become incredibly active, and events are developing in an escalating manner. This concludes our detailed analysis of the operational situation for March 11th. The situation on the fronts remains complex. The enemy is insidious and uses both information provocations and terrorist strikes on our cities. But our fighters on the front line are doing incredible, titanic work, risking their lives every day. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this video with those who want to know the truth and not fall for enemy fakes. Until next time on the air, take care of yourselves and your loved ones.